Hello, my gentle and, of course, very modern apes. It's me, gutsickgibbon, back for another, let's call it filler content style video. It's a beautiful day, the birds are singing, the sun is shining, not a cloud in the sky, so I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to sit inside and review another crusty book that I found in my parents' basement. This one is titled The Great Dinosaur Mystery Solved by Ken Ham, our boy, the man of the hour, a biblical view of these amazing creatures. Now, my copy of the text is very old indeed. This is an edition from 1998. I was born in 96, so I don't know how my parents came into possession. I suspect it's like a monkey's paw kind of situation, but I digress. This thing is so old that it's got the characteristic book arthritis. Hear that? Petrified. Scratch that. On the inside cover, it says the first printing for the case-bound edition was 98. The first printing for the paperback was in 2000. And the fourth printing was in 2004. So I actually have no idea which one this one is. I know it's a paperback. It's either 2000 or 2004. Hear that? No answers to be found. I thought this was Answers in Genesis. This book promises what happened to the dinosaurs and a coverage of dinosaur history from all of our favorite dinosaurs, including T-Rex, dragons, Plesiosaur, Leviathan, Pterodon, Stegosaurus, Behemoth, and Triceratops. All the dinosaurs are covered here. And then there's a big section called The Implications, which classically feels a bit like a threat.
Because of the implication.
Okay. You had me going there for the first part. The second half kind of threw me.
And it's all illustrated by Dan Letha. If you don't remember who Dan Letha is, I promise you have seen his cartoons before if you've ever set foot in the creationism scene. Let's view some classics. So this is Dan Letha. He has a couple of different types of jokes in his After Eden cartoon. There's this type, which Eve says, Adam, what do you suppose thorns and thistles looks like? And Adam's got like a thorn in his foot in the background. This is jokes that most people understand, but especially creationists. Then there's the second type, which are jokes that pretty much only creationists would understand. Like, you have to be hip with the YAC jive. This one is After Eden phrases, and this guy says, have you ever had one of those days? And then she says, this just isn't my day. And then that guy says, I thought my day couldn't get worse. And then she goes, I hate Mondays. And the joke is that before the fall of man, all days were good days. Then there's another type of joke, which is the specific YEC joke that also jabs at evolution or science generally. This guy says, how could Noah have possibly fit the dinosaurs on the ark? And then this guy says, how is it possible for your mom to give birth to you? And then at the bottom, Letha goes on to explain the joke, which is even the largest full-grown creatures were once small, implying that Noah took like baby dinosaurs onto the ark. This is another variety of that same joke, where the guy goes, today's weather forecast is 100% sunshine, and it's clearly pouring rain. And then at the bottom, Letha says, tell me again why I should trust scientists' ability to be accurate about life on Earth millions of years ago. And then there's the last kind of Dan Letha cartoon, which is inappropriate styles of, they're not really jokes, they're just like inappropriate situations. What does a young Earth creationist, or when does a young Earth creationist believe in millions of years? When waiting for news about the conditions of a loved one. And she's like in the surgery waiting room. Or this one, Elizabeth was so looking forward to making a second visit to the Creation Museum. And then his friend says, her remaining creation questions are now being answered in the presence of the Creator for all of creation. Not in the best of taste, I would say. Letha likes to do the COVID denialism thing, or at least light COVID denialism. He also likes to do the global warming is a hoax kind of joke, which is also not very funny. And one of my personal favorites is his recent culture war joke, where here he's got like Disney is, parents protect your children from Mickey Mouse and the woke mob. It's It's funny, but in kind of like a bummer kind of way. He's our illustrator for the fantastic tome, The Great Dinosaur Mystery Solved. Our author is, of course, as I mentioned previously, our boy, Ken Ham. And on the back, they've just used every drop of ink in a printer to print this picture of them. I don't know why they chose it. This is also that one picture that makes him look very Australopith-like. I'm not sure why he has this one on blast all the time, but this is an older book. So I think we should go ahead and get started on this treasure. What happened to the dinosaurs? Why is it an important question? As far as most people are concerned, dinosaurs and evolution go hand in hand. Dinosaurs are used more than almost anything to convince children and adults alike that there have been millions of years of Earth history. I do feel personally that a better convincer of that would be radiometric dating's use in the entire fossil fuel industry of the planet. But I digress. Most Christians do not know that the Bible can be used as a basis for explaining dinosaurs in terms of thousands of years of history and solving the mystery of when they lived and what happened to them. After all, Colossians 2:3 states about our Lord, in whom are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And then they give some homework for you here. Are dinosaurs a mystery? Many think that the existence of dinosaurs and their demise is shrouded in such mystery that we may never know the truth about where they came from, when they lived, or whatever happened to them. However, dinosaurs are only a mystery if you accept the evolutionary story of their history. According to evolutionists, dinosaurs first evolved 235 million years ago, long before man evolved. The Mesozoic is called the Dinosaur Age. No human being ever lived with dinosaurs, say evolutionists. And there is a source for that, so let's head back to the appendix, because this isn't a Standing for Truth book, and we actually have all our sources listed in an easy-to-access fashion. In the back, we have our appendix, our references, and this first one is called the Encyclopedia of Dinosaurs, Size and Scaling. I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and note that when this book was published in 2004 or 2000 or 1998, whichever date we're going to go with for this section of the text, we knew why the dinosaurs went extinct. The Alvarez hypothesis was well into swing, and we knew that the reason that the dinosaurs went extinct, at least the non-avian dinosaurs, is due to a massive impact event that created the Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan Peninsula. Part of the way that we know this is because the layer above where the last dinosaur fossils ever appear is full of iridium. Iridium is an element that is found in massive quantities only in asteroids, and this iridium layer is dated to the same time period as the Chicxulub impact crater itself. So we know that it was an iridium-filled asteroid that smacked into the Yucatan Peninsula and spelled doom for all the dinosaurs, and indeed many of the marine reptiles, the non-avian dinosaurs, at least. Now, as for how dinosaurs came about, we have a well-filled fossil record from before the Triassic up into the Triassic and throughout the Mesozoic, which traces the evolution of the dinosaurs and their myriad of forms that we now know of today. But to Ken, it's a mystery, so let's continue. The record of their history is contained in the fossil layers over the Earth that were deposited over millions of years. They were so successful as a group of animals that dinosaurs eventually ruled the Earth. However, 65 million years ago, something happened to change all this. At the end of the Cretaceous period of the Mesozoic era, dinosaurs died out. Most evolutionists believe some sort of cataclysmic event or events destroyed them. One of the most popular theories about their extinction is that an asteroid hit the Earth, resulting in a catastrophic change to the Earth's climate, greatly affecting all life, especially the dinosaurs. However, many evolutionists claim dinosaurs evolved into birds and thus are not extinct, but are flying around us today. All these ideas are guesses and make dinosaurs a great mystery. Remember, every theory is a guess when you really put, rubber to the road here. The gag here is we're not going to touch the robust catalog of support for the impactor in Chicxulub in this tome. We're just going to chalk it up to a big guess, kind of like the other theories that are big guesses, like evolution or germ theory or quantum theory or gravity, for that matter. But then there is no mystery surrounding dinosaurs if you accept this totally different account of dinosaur history, the biblical history. Dinosaurs first existed around 6,000 years ago because dinosaurs were land mammals and God made all the land animals on day 6 of the creation week. I suppose then that the marine reptiles are included in the fish category if we're going by AIG here. Adam and Eve were also made on day 6 alongside the dinosaurs, so dinosaurs live with people, representatives of all kinds is in caps, so treat your ulcers this evening, ladies and gentlemen. including the dinosaur kinds went aboard Noah's Ark. All of those that were left behind drowned in the cataclysmic circumstances of the flood. Many of their remains became fossils. The flood was 4,500 years ago, and the land animals, including dinosaurs, came off the ark and lived in the present world beside people. Because of sin, the judgment and the curse of the effects of the flood had greatly changed the earth. Since the flood, many animals have died out from diseases, lack of food, etc. The dinosaurs, like many other creatures, seem to have also died out. According to this view, there is no mystery around dinosaurs. Okay, fascinating. So there's no questions on, like, why is it that it's just the Mesozoic and Permian animals that went extinct? And the Cenozoic remains virtually untouched in comparison, despite similarities in overall ecosystem composition. This is not a question that Ken Ham actually has, but I digress yet again. Why are the views so different? So now we get the classic Dan Letha cartoon, different views, same evidence. If you are an AIG aficionado or ex-aficionado, this should be very familiar to you. How can there be such totally different explanations for the dinosaurs? Think about this. Whether one account is evolutionist or accepts one account is evolutionist or the other accepts the Bible's account of history, all the evidence is the same. All scientists have the same facts, they have the same world, etc., etc. If the facts are all the same, then how can the explanations be different? The reason is quite simple. Scientists only have the present to work with. Ah yes, observational science versus historical science, ladies and gentlemen. Dinosaur fossils only exist in the present. Yet scientists try to connect the fossils they find to events that they suppose about the past. They ask what happened in history to bring the dinosaurs into existence and form their fossils and cause them to not be around today. Obviously, no scientist has lived through all the history on Earth. Shocking. There is no way to explain dinosaurs unless someone who can be trusted has recorded the events of history to enable us to explain the evidence we now see before us. Thus, real science uses our five senses in the present and cannot ultimately answer questions about the unobservable and unreported past. Real science can build jet airplanes, make computers, and so on, but real observational science cannot deal directly with the past as we only work with the present. Most people don't realize that evolution is not science, it's a belief about the past. Creation is not science either, okay, granted, excellent, just hit my hat because I'm getting so passionate. It's a belief about the past based on the record in the Bible that itself claims to be the Word of God, of one who has always existed and who is perfect and never tells a lie. The Bible claims to be a true record of history, the past and the future. So let's stop for a second and discuss observational and historical science. Ken Ham likes to make this distinction. I don't know too many people in academia who actually make this distinction today, but we should talk about it nonetheless. When we make predictions about things that happened in the past, we are using observational science. We're using observations of how the world operates and is run today in accordance with its natural laws and applying it backwards in time, usually using like an actualistic perspective. So for example, we know certain processes today leave certain diagnostic characteristics in the rock. We may make a prediction about where to find coal or another type of fossil fuel using these present day observations, and when we use those to inform our predictions and find coal, that is a confirmation of the actualistic, or sometimes people archaically refer to it as a uniformitarian perspective, and lets us know that yes, indeed, the processes that govern the world today govern the world in the past as well. Radioactive decay laws work in a similar way. So when we find coal or oil or natural gases using natural geologic processes as they operate today in accordance with or in corroboration with radioactive decay laws and radiometric dating, and we find those natural gases, oils, or coals, this is a massive confirmation that those mechanisms work, that they're an accurate means by which to explore the age of the Earth. And boy, wouldn't you know it, the fossil fuel industry is just one of the backbones of the entire economy of the world today. So I would say that yes, it does work. And by applying observational science, as Ken would say, to the past, we can make accurate predictions about historical science. And when they are proved to be accurate, we can indeed say that we know things, capital K, know things about the past. Ken goes on to say, ultimately, there are only two ways of thinking. One that starts with the revelation, biblical record from God as a foundation to all thinking, biology, history, geology, etc., which would be called the Christian worldview, or starting with man's beliefs, the evolutionary history as a foundation to all thinking, which would be called the secular worldview. So an excellent job here by Ken Ham by basically saying there is the very specific viewpoint, of very specific interpretation of the Christian Bible, and that's just all Christians. Of course, this is not the case. There are more evolution and age of the earth accepting Christians today than there are young earth creationists or even old earth creationists in the United States, which is the haven of YECs. And he's just pitting that against everyone else and calling that the secular worldview. The evolution accepting Christians, people of literally any other religion, and those who truly are secular are all lumped together versus this very small minority of Christians today. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, that's ultimately unfair, and it's just doing a no true Scotsman fallacy, right? Most Christians have been indoctrinated through the media and education system to think in a secular way. They tend to take their secular thinking to the Bible instead of using the Bible to build all of their thinking. I would argue that it is generally the case that a proper exegesis, at least from the perspective of biblical scholars, does not take the Genesis account as a literal truth, even from the perspectives of the people that wrote it. He does the thing where he says that the evolutionist view has no eyewitnesses, evidently just forgetting about all of the history that goes deeper than 6,000 years that was recorded by humans, pretty much all of the Mesopotamian civilizations, for example. But, the rocks were there as well, and their record is indeed quite damning for the young earth creationist worldview. Not just the rocks in the sense of their radiometric dating, but everything that corroborates that dating method. Things like the rate at which the continents move, ice cores, dendrochronology, the rates of deposition of various different types of sediment. All sorts of things are problematic. We could go over them here. I've gone over them in other places, so I won't bore you here. So you can check them out there. He goes on with the chapter, Which View is Right? I know this is going to be unbiased. Many Christians do not know how to deal with dinosaurs. The main reason is because they are not using the Bible as their book of history. In other words, they are not building their framework of thinking on events of history as recorded in the Bible. For instance, if the Bible teaches there was no death of animals or people before the fall of Adam, then this will affect the way Christians interpret fossils. Except, as I've said before in my Everything Wrong with the Creation Museum and Ark Encounter video, this is not supported by scripture, so you can see that in the description with a time code if you would like. But I find this really interesting, right? Who remembers being younger and having a relative or hearing about someone's relative who said that dinosaurs weren't real and the fossils were just planted, by Satan to trick the believing Christian? Clearly they have evolved since then. And by the time I was a youngster, the young earth creationists did accept that dinosaurs were a real thing. But I think it's interesting how they're kind of pulled, kicking and screaming into accepting certain aspects of science that they simply can't deny once the evidence has become so voluminous. And I wonder if that'll happen further for evolution. We've already kind of got them on kinds, so they've got to have these groups that, within these groups, evolution can occur, but evolution cannot occur between groups. I would argue perhaps it's only a matter of time. Okay, in fact, the purpose of this book is to show that when one does start with the Bible to build the framework of thinking, one can consistently interpret the evidence concerning dinosaurs and construct a history that can be logically defended. Interesting. Can't wait to hear it. Biblical history does make sense out of the evidence, even if one doesn't know much about dinosaurs. By starting with the Bible, lots, all caps, lots, can be explained about dinosaurs. Okay. At the same time, we will reveal the evolutionist view of history cannot consistently explain the evidence or be logically defended. Excellent. Dinosaur history. How do we know dinosaurs even existed? How do we know that dinosaurs ever existed, given all that we can trust is mere historical science, Ken? What if all that paramineralized bone is actually just a coincidence? It just so happens that they were all shaped in such a way so as to look like they were bones instead of just eroded rock. Yes, I realize that that's statistically quite impossible, but so are the odds that all of the dating methods that we use just so happen to zero in on a very ancient Earth, for instance. Fossil bones of what are now called dinosaurs are found all over the world. Although many finds consist of just fragments of bones, some remarkable discoveries of nearly complete skeletons have been found. Scientists have been able to describe many different types of animals that fit under the heading dinosaur based off of distinctive characteristics such as the structure of the skull, limbs, etc. However, there doesn't appear to be any consistent definition as to what is or is not a dinosaur. Generally speaking, and the dinosaur people can come after me on this one, it's Saurischia and Ornithischia. That combination of organisms is what we get for Dinosauria, which is just a clade. It's not like a super sound grouping, if you will. Evolutionists claim these bones date back millions of years, but it's important to realize that when they dig up a dinosaur bone, classic Ken Ham right here, it doesn't have a label attached to it showing its date. No, the label is actually found by looking at the ratio of parent to daughter elements within the surrounding rock. So just to clear that up, there actually is a label if you know how to read it. Evolutionists obtain their dates by indirect dating methods that other scientists show cannot even be trusted. Oh my, what mudslinging. And we have citation number 12 for that, so I would be quite interested to see who we're toting out for the bad dating methods. Do we want to say Snelling? Those of you who are out in the chat, go ahead and start taking bets. Austin? Oh, no. Wait, just kidding. I was looking at the wrong one. No, it's Austin. I was right. It was Austin. Grand Canyon, Monument to Catastrophe, Austin. And let's see precisely what we're citing. Is it going to be polonium halos, fission tracks, helium? Nope. It's from dating the diabase sills. It's been a hot minute since I've seen this example used, probably because it's been so thoroughly stomped into the dust. But the long story short is this. Austin dated the Uinkaret Plateau, definitely pronouncing that wrong, and the geologists are going to have my head for it. And the dates that came back were like 10,000 to 2.6 billion years old, which is obviously older than like the oldest basalt, and can't be true. So Austin is like, see, isochron dating, which is the type of method he used, doesn't actually work. And geologists actually like got an opportunity to take a look at his methods, because he was like, look at this is big for us creationists. He did not publish it in a peer-reviewed secular geology journal, but people were still able to see his methods, and there was a massive problem, as there almost always is to my memory, but I'm leaving room for things that I haven't investigated yet. So for isochron dating to work, for the results to make sense, you have to actually make sure that the samples you're taking are cogenetic. That is to say, the material came from the same source or the same event, thus ensuring that they're isotopically homogeneous. To put it in like layman's speak, if you're taking samples from different events, you're measuring the date of those separate events and kind of treating it like it's a single slope, like it's a single curve, like it's linear and these two things are related, and that's going to give you noise as a result. This would be like a doctor prescribing antibiotics to someone with a viral infection and then being shocked and declaring antibiotics are nonsense when they don't actually make an impact, right? Because antibiotics are used for bacterial infections. You can't be surprised when you don't follow the one rule of a procedure that the procedure itself doesn't actually work. And we know that isochron dating actually does work quite well when you're following the procedures because we've corroborated it with other methods. So I find it kind of shocking, and you could fill in the blank, shocking, that Austin did this. This doesn't make any sense for someone with geologic training to do. But then again, it's quite similar to Andrew Snelling, another young Earth creationist geologist, trying to radiometrically date brand new rock, which is another thing you can't do. It violates the principles of how radiometric dating works, because when you're measuring brand new rock, it's all parent material, and you end up with noise as a result. It's like trying to weigh a truck on a microgram scale. Next, we get into the soft tissue in dinosaur bones section. This has got to be from 2004. This has got to be a newer copy if we're doing the Schweitzer dance here. Of course, they don't actually mention, oh yes they do, I'm sorry, Ken, you do mention Mary Schweitzer here, but they do refer to it as fresh bone, red blood cells. I've talked about this many times before. There was no actual fresh tissue, no blood cells, nothing like that discovered in, Mary Schweitzer's samples. There were framboids, so the impression of the iron left behind from red blood cells, but not red blood cells themselves. And in fact, an old Earth creationist, Dr. Fuzz Rana, has an excellent book about this very subject titled Dinosaur Blood and the Age of the Earth. So you might be thinking, okay, well, but that's still soft tissue. It's still preserved biological material. Well, kind of. What's preserved is all, with no exception, the most robust biomolecules out there. We're talking keratin, we're talking collagen, we're talking chitin, remains of these things, not even necessarily the original structures themselves. The real question is, if all of this happened in Noah's flood, or at the very least in the last 6,000 years, why aren't we scooping up biomolecules with much shorter half-lives by the bucketful? Why aren't we able to pull DNA from T-Rexes if we can pull it from mammoths, which supposedly died in the same event? Why is there a preservation bias here, Ken? And I don't think people mention that point enough, that there is a bias here that only supports a much more ancient timescale. Furthermore, there are preservation methods that have been shown in a lab using observational science to preserve these types of biomolecules, or at least the remnants of them, like 200-fold times what was expected. But we don't go into any of this, right? Like, Ken doesn't take the opportunity to say, hey, here's why, for instance, those preservation methods proposed by the secular scientific institution don't work. It's a Donnie Deal's fallacy. We present, okay, the Earth is, 4.8 billion years old. They say, nope, because fresh dinosaur tissue. And then you say, that's cool that you say that, but this fresh dinosaur tissue isn't fresh. It's all very robust biomolecules. It's no softer, shorter half-life to biomolecules that you would expect if the Earth is only 6,000 years old, things like DNA, for example. And perhaps most importantly of all, there are preservation mechanisms that have been shown to work. And then Ken just says, but have you considered fresh dinosaur tissue? Good. Love it. The next section is titled, What Did Dinosaurs Look Like? And I say the next section because this is after we blast the theistic evolutionists for a moment in here. And by we, I mean Ken Ham attempts to do so and does so poorly. He does the whole, there was no death in the garden before the fall because God said it was good. So that means there couldn't have been death. And it's like, covered this, again in my video on the Ark Encounter in the Creation Museum, but that's not scripturally sound, and pretty much no biblical academic thinks so. But take Ken Ham's word for it, right? It is important to realize that when scientists dig up the bones of dinosaurs, they do not uncover an animal with its flesh still intact. Even if they found all the bones, and they often only have a few fragments, dinosaurs would still have less to work with than 40% of the animal to tell the whole story. For example, the bones do not tell what color the animal was or what it ate for dinner. Even though some fossil skin impressions have been found, when scientists reconstruct dinosaurs from bony remains, they have to make all kinds of assumptions. Scientists have made mistakes in their reconstructions, and then they've mentioned the Brontosaurus Incident, and I think that this is mostly to try to cast doubt on feathered dinosaurs. Unfortunately for Ken, since 2004, we've uncovered so many feathered dinosaurs, it's actually insane. So I'll put a little clip of a couple of them here. In Where Did Dinosaurs Come From and When Did They Live?, they say evolutionists guess that dinosaurs evolved from some reptile that itself originally evolved from amphibians. However, they can't point to any transitional forms, i.e. in between, to substantiate their argument. If one looks up the dinosaur family tree in an evolutionist book, I have many of those myself, it will show many distinct types of dinosaurs, but only hypothetical lines joining them up to some common ancestor. Well, let's just take a look at that for ourselves too, then. Tisk, Ken. I would also like to take this opportunity to gripe about the elephants that were drawn in this picture here. As you can see, it's supposed to be a male and a female African elephant, as evidenced by their head shape and ear size, but the female is tuskless. Tusks are not a dimorphic trait in African elephants, right? Not in presence, they're both there. And I guess I have to do all the work around here. Ken goes on to talk about how it was actually 6 days and not millions of years, and he doesn't really give us any receipts for that other than he's like, the Bible says so. And then he's like, we can get 6,000 years by counting up the approximate years given in the Bible. It's come on, guys. You're supposed to be the observational science team. Let's get some confidence behind those numbers. Question. Does God tell us when he made Tyrannosaurus Rex? I was thinking the same thing, and I know you were too. Many Christians would say no. I would imagine most of them would say that. But if T-Rex was a land animal, God made all the land animals on day 6, so he must have made T-Rex on day 6. When was Spinosaurus made, do you guys think, given its potential aquatic nature? I'm hoping to start a fight with the dinosaur lovers in the chat. We have the nice picture of T-Rex here. I actually quite like this picture. I love old paleo art, and Dan Letha, I guess, must as well. We get some stats on T-Rex, which is pretty cool. And then we get this description, which talks about what it must have eaten, and we're greeted with this delightful sentence. It's certainly possible that T-Rex teeth were designed for eating special types of green herbs, such as large melons, gourds, coconuts, and large hard seed pods. Just imagine that. I know Letha has. He's drawn it before. For those of you not in the know, the idea is that everything was vegetarian in the Garden of Eden, and then once the fall happened, everything started, eating meat, except for people. That it didn't happen for humans until after Noah's Ark. No, I will not elaborate. I find it very funny that the curse, though, is what corrupted the original perfect design, and that in the perfect design, giant archosaurs are using their, knife-sized dagger teeth to consume melons and gourds. I really don't know if that's, the best design for an animal that is eating those types of foods. Now, to this, Ken Ham and sycophants would perhaps say, yeah, but gorillas have large canine teeth, and they consume nothing but vegetation. And pandas do too. And, to that I would say they have 4 types of teeth in their mouths because they're mammals. So they have their incisors, right? And they have their canine teeth. And then they have their premolars or their carnassials. And then they have their molars, right? So they use those teeth to actually process the vegetation to get it into, a form that they can then digest. They don't use their canines for that. And T-Rex has nothing but canines in its mouth. So, functionally, I don't think that that's going to work for me as an explanation. And you're going to have to do better than that or produce for me the perfect design T-Rex, the original T-Rex design, which, of course, was a T-Rex with only incisors and molars. But remember, this is supposed to be degenerate, right? So the form of T-Rex, of all living things after the fall, is supposed to be proceeding towards degeneracy. That's how I describe this channel too. But the point of this is that it's not just the teeth that would really have to change, because they go on and describe all of the additional adaptations that Tyrannosaurus Rex in particular had that would have aided it in being this mega carnivore, or at least capable of processing massive amounts of meat, whether it's scavenging it or hunting them down itself, including, anchoring powerful muscles in the neck and face. So, were those used for processing melons too? How big of melons are we talking here? What is the size of the melon, Ken?
Ooh, that's kind of small. Yikes.
Who discovered dinosaurs? Secular books will tell you that the first discovery of what were later called dinosaurs was in 1677 when Dr. Robert Plott found bones so big that they thought they belonged to a giant elephant or a giant human. In 1963, Brooks used the name... You're not ready for this. Brooks used the name Scrotum Humanum to caption the drawing of the bone that Plott had found. Ken! What the heck? Can you just imagine, right, Ken Ham sitting in his bungalow or whatever it is that Australians live in, and he's sipping on his Fosters. Yeah, he's not cool enough to drink. He's sipping on his tea. He's having a tea as he sweats profusely and types the word Scrotum Humanum into his young Earth creationist great dinosaur mystery book for kids. His eyes are bloodshot and his labored breathing. He manages to squeak out, "Blimey, I'm in a right pickle." It's you're close to the pickle. You're not quite there, right? So, there's no way that I can actually prepare you for what you're about to see. There's nothing that I can do to sort of properly set this up for you. The remains that were actually found by Buckland, or by Brooks, excuse me, were actually from a megalosaurus. It was the distal end of a femur. And the Wikipedia article has this nice picture to show you the original sketch. And like, it looks like this. It looks like, scrotum humanum, right? Like, I'm worried I'm gonna get demonetized just for showing this. But you can see perhaps the resemblance. And what tickles me even further is the fact that scrotum humanum had priority, right? Because the way that it works is that if you want to change a name, no matter the circumstances, you have to formally petition to the International Commission of Zoological Nomenclature, so the ICZN, and evidently they wouldn't let them change it right away. They say that Brooks understood that the stone did not actually represent a pair of petrified testicles was irrelevant. So they didn't change it right away. These days, obviously, it's not called scrotum humanum anymore, but it's still technically considered a junior synonym, which is very funny. This entire book review is worth it just for this revelation, if you will. Then Ken says that all the discoveries of dinosaurs were actually dumb because they're rediscoveries, not actually real discoveries, because humans and dinosaurs already lived together earlier in the 6,000-year tenure that they've been on the planet. So, Dinosaurs with People, another Latha classic. This looks like the Havasupai dinosaur. Just kidding. That one looks more like the one that they found in Australia. Evolutionists are dogmatic that dinosaurs never lived beside humans. These creatures supposedly died out millions of years before man evolved. But in fact, there is a lot of historical evidence that dinosaurs did live with humans. This will be discussed in detail later. Now, quick note, now it seems like historical science is playing, quite a heavy role for Ken, isn't it? What happened to observational science? We're not seeing any non-avian dinosaurs around here today, Ken, so I suppose we can simply write it off. In reality, the historical science that he's talking about is people drawing vaguely dinosaur-like pictures or talking about dragons and their mythologies. And the actual quote-unquote historical science that we have on the matter is the fact that never once, ever, have we found a primate skeleton alongside that of any Mesozoic dinosaur. It just has never happened. They've never been found in the same layer or in layers that are even like close or adjacent. So, that's kind of all we can say about that. But I'm sure Ken will double down. Because the Bible teaches that the animals we now call dinosaurs were made on the same day as the first two people, Christians can authoritatively state that dinosaurs did live with people. This can be declared on the basis of the authority of the Word of God. This is thinking biblically. That's very confident. I'll say that. Where did the word dinosaur come from? Yes. Okay, so this is the part where they say that dinosaur was invented recently, and so no one could have ever talked about dinosaurs in the past. And when they were talking about dragons, actually what they were seeing were dinosaurs. And they've got this nice picture here and this nice graphic that I can only assume was made in kid pics. So, continuing onward, I actually did like the dragon drawing. And then we've got this that they're going to say is a baryonyx. I didn't even read it, but I was right. Who drew this, though? Who drew this baryonyx that King George fought? Because, to me, this looks like a Dan Latha drawing. Where are our historical supports for this, right? All the King George drawings that I've ever seen are not this. Dragons have long been thought of as creatures of legend. Actually, they were real creatures that lived with many of the animals we see today and with man. The Bible talks about dragons as real animals, as we read in Psalm 91:13. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and dragon thou shalt trample underfoot. Isaiah 43:20 also speaks of dragons as real animals. The beasts of the field shall honor me, the dragons and the owls, because I give waters in the wilderness and rivers in the desert to give drink to my people. It's just a bunch of it's a bunch of biblical references. And I'm curious about this because I didn't know that there were other references to dragons in the Old Testament. Perhaps we should investigate. I do the investigation so you don't have to. Now, in the first example, that's Psalm 91:13, In everything besides the King James Version, dragon is actually translated as serpent or cobra. Fascinating. So then I saw that and I was like, well, which one is the right one? Because Ken would simply say, well, these other versions are just the wrong version. So I thought, okay, well, let's just look at the OG account, right? The Hebrew. Ken can't argue with that. Uh-oh, Spaghetti-O. It looks like they interpret it also as serpent or cobra, which is interesting and concerning, perhaps, if you are Ken. But that being said, we got to be honest here. Cobra. Okay, what about the other one? Isaiah 43:20. Uh-oh. This time dragon is actually interpreted as jackal in all the versions besides the King James Version again. Curious. But what about the OG Hebrew? You're screaming and pounding your keyboard like a crazed chimp. I approve. When we do that, we find that it is actually jackal. That's the OG Hebrew translation. So I think we can at least put to bed the idea that Ken is doing a proper exegesis here and continue onward with our journey on the great dinosaur mystery. Now, he goes on to describe the baryonyx more specifically, and I guess make the case that the baryonyx is what King George fought, and also that it's what we see in the flag of Wales. So Welsh people revel in that. In the film The Great Dinosaur Mystery, a number of dragon legends are accounted for. So I guess there was also like a companion movie that went with this. And then they start talking about a dragon, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and in China, and in England, and in all sorts of different stories. And to that I will say what I've said many times before, which is, if you want to use the prevalence of certain tropes in ancient mythologies as your sort of barometer for what creatures are real and what aren't, then we have a lot of shape-shifting deities to discover yet in the world, and a whole lot of human-animal hybrids, because those also seem to pop up in pretty much every kind of legend in every kind of culture, right? Now we move on to discuss the Plesiosaur, which is great. We're talking about Cryptocleidos, which is at least a cool one. I like the drawing here. And in discussing the Plesiosaur, I'm sure we're going to discuss the Loch Ness Monster and pretty much any type or style of lake creature, because that's usually where they say these guys are hiding. And some people might even go so far as to blame the Mokele Mbembe on this thing, but we'll see. Even though the word dinosaur refers, technically speaking, to animals that lived on land, many people group the sea reptiles and flying reptiles with dinosaurs. We could argue that the dragons that lived in the water were probably dinosaur-like animals. Okay, so they're just the same thing. Job 41 has a description of a great animal that lived in the sea, Leviathan, that even breathed fire. This dragon might have been something like the mighty Kronosaurus. Okay, so that's weird. They're just embracing the whole fire-breathing thing. Usually people are like, yeah, there's some, younger creationists, they'll say, oh, well, there's some embellishment going on there with the fire-breathing aspect of the Leviathan mentioned in Job 41. It's just a dinosaur. It's just a, Kronosaur or some sort of ambiguous mosasaur, but it didn't have to breathe fire. But Dan Letha has just depicted an aquatic, fire-breathing mosasaur, which, if you need any tattoo ideas, I couldn't think of a better one. It's even got, smoke streaming from its nostrils. He talks briefly about pterodons. I almost said pterodons, but unfortunately, there is no mention of the classic YEC example that's always brought up of that one cowboy that shot a pterodon, allegedly. But then we get to what did dinosaurs eat and how did they behave? Okay, fascinating, because we were talking about this earlier. Surely here we will get an explanation for the melons and gourds on which the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex gorged itself. Originally, before sin, all animals, including dinosaurs, were vegetarian. Yes, we are well aware that this is what you think. This means that even T-Rex before sin entered the world only ate plants. Some people object to this clear biblical teaching by pointing to the 6-inch long teeth that a large T-Rex had, insisting they must have used them for attacking animals. Yes, by people, Ken means me. However, just because an animal has large, sharp teeth doesn't mean it is or was a meat eater. It just means it has big, sharp teeth. To use for what? Ken? Nibbling on some vegetarian charcuterie, no doubt. There are many animals today that have sharp teeth but are basically vegetarian. Okay, we're gonna get some mentions of the ones that I already said, including the Chinese panda. Evolutionists often make the comment that the panda evolved as a meat eater so it could get sharp teeth, but now uses them to eat mainly bamboo. Yes, and I argue that it now processes the bamboo using its molars. We'll look at these in just a moment. He also mentions flying foxes, or fruit bats, have long, sharp teeth like those of vicious meat-eating animals, yet their diet consists of fruit. Bears have the same sort of teeth structure as a big cat, but bears are vegetarian. Some bears are vegetarian and others are mainly vegetarian. Wait, some bears are vegetarian and others are mainly vegetarian. I see. Okay, as has already been discussed, there were no flesh eaters before sin. The world's animals, including dinosaurs and the first two people, lived in perfect harmony. In fact, the Bible's description of the world before sin was called very good, but it just didn't mention that everything was a vegetarian and nothing died. Nor did it actually draw the line between what things were allowed to die, such as plants or microorganisms or perhaps insects, and what organisms were not allowed to die, actually. So I want to take a moment and look at some of these teeth. We got some good teeth to examine here for the critters that were mentioned just now by Ken Ham, and I want to talk about their teeth, because talking about teeth is terrific. So this is a panda jaw over here. Like I said earlier, mammals have multiple different types of teeth, and in the case of this panda, we have the incisors in the front. Our incisors are these little block ones here. The canines are your pointy tooth. They have them as well. These are their most intimidating looking teeth when you think of bears and carnivores in general. They have their carnassials, which are these ones here on the side that look like shears. And then you have your molars in the back. And molars are used for grinding. And these are the molars of a panda. Very wrinkly, very almost bunodont looking, for crushing things and processing plants. Interesting. Big cats do not have molars like this, except for my Smilodon back here, but that's because it's a bad cast. It's not even a cast, it's a bad model. How about flying foxes? Similar situation. They have their primary canine teeth for their most intimidating looking teeth in the front, and then they have in the back their molars, which are used for processing and grinding up their fruit. Grizzlies, same situation. Carnassials on the sides, canines up here, and incisors in the front. And in fact, grizzlies have much more imposing canines because they actually utilize them on a daily basis, right? They eat a whole lot of prey animals. So they eat organic matter that isn't plant. So they have to hold on to their prey with these teeth and, crush their larynx or whatever it is that grizzlies do. But you can see their carnassials here and their molars in the back for grinding up the plant matter that they do eat. Fascinating. And you'll notice looking at this T-Rex skull that it does not have more than one type of tooth. Most dinosaurs are going to be homodont, so they have one singular type of tooth. In the case of the T-Rex, it's a big, pointy one. Mammals, on the other hand, are heterodont, so they tend to have more than one type of tooth. A lot of alliteration here. This thing is not eating melons or gourds, for that matter. And if you want to kind of show me otherwise, provide for me either the largest melon or the largest fossilized melon, or alternatively a T-Rex that's all incisors. But then Ken does a weird thing because he has a section called What About Characteristics of Animals Today that seems suited for hunting and killing. You mean like homodont sharp teeth of a T-Rex? Like, he starts talking about how Henry Morris says that fangs and claws may be recessive features that came about through selection later. Remember, they're okay with some evolution, just not the kinds that they don't like. And where that line is, well, let's put it this way, the thing is on wheels and has an engine attached to it. But, why not teeth too? You know what I'm saying? Why not just say that dinosaurs used to have all incisors or all molars? Why go to the trouble of just trying to explain how something like a T-Rex or any of those big toothy archosaurs are just eating gourds and herbs and stuff. Okay, so now they talk about why do we find dinosaur fossils. So this is going to be our flood story. The formations of fossils is basically a catastrophic event. When an animal dies, it usually decays until there's nothing left. To form a fossil, however, unique conditions are required to preserve the animal and replace it with minerals, etc. Evolutionists used to claim that the fossil record was laid down slowly as animals died and were covered by sediment. But in more recent times, they've admitted, you love that word choice, that the fossil record necessarily involves catastrophic processes. To form the billions of fossils we see worldwide, sometimes in layers miles thick, the organisms by and large must have been buried quickly. Evolutionists are now basically saying that the fossil record formed quickly, but over millions of years. So, couple of notes here, just to maybe pencil in. Not all fossilization has to be quick, necessarily. There are fossils, and I'm using that term usually not in the paramineralization sense, but like we have remains preserved of organisms that, for instance, fall into eutrophic lakes, and then they sink to the bottom into anoxic conditions, and they fossilize that way, slowly. They're not buried quickly by sediment, but there's just nothing to eat them down there until the sediment that does cover them slowly over time covers them. There's also like tar pits, right, or amber. There are other means by which things can preserve without needing to be covered up quickly. But then there's also like local catastrophes, and those happen all the time today. And they seem to have happened all the time in the past, based off of the fact that they leave diagnostic characteristics of themselves today, and we find those diagnostic characteristics in the past. So I don't know why it needs to be a catastrophe that's worldwide. Like, why does it not occur to Ken Hand that local mudslides, or local submarine slides, or local earthquakes, local volcanism, these are things, again, they happen today. Why is this hard to grasp? According to the biblical record, the earth after the fall became full of wickedness. Okay, so now we're talking about the flood, and then we're finally getting to many people think that dinosaurs were large creatures and thus couldn't have fit onto the ark. But the truth of the matter is that the average size of a dinosaur based off of the skeletons all over the earth is about the size of a sheep. Many dinosaurs were quite small. For instance, Struthiomimus was only the size of an ostrich, and Compsognathus was no bigger than a rooster. Few dinosaurs grew to be extremely large sizes, but even they were not as big as the largest animal in the world today, a blue whale. So AIG has kind of pivoted on this point. They don't do the average size of all dinosaurs is very small. Now they just say no, it took kid dinosaurs, like juveniles. And I think they really should have gone with that in the beginning as well. But it's getting harder and harder to justify because we find like a new dinosaur species, every week. So that ark's starting to get crowded. Dinosaurs laid eggs, and the biggest fossil dinosaur ever found was about the size of a football. Dinosaur egg found was the size of a football. So maybe the implication here is maybe they're taking eggs. And then we have some Protoceratops eggs right here. The baby dinosaur hatchling from the egg is a Stegosaurus, and it's a good drawing here, Dan Letha. You love to see it. Okay, so now we're talking about stegosaurs and the nature of their morphology and functionality, how dumb they are, how they got small brains. Just gotta come after the stegosaur. They're not even here to defend themselves. As you look at this baby Stegosaurus hatching from its egg, think of how easy it would have been for Noah to take in a number of dinosaurs on the ark. But again, taking the eggs have to be incubated, and most animals learn from their parents, right? It's observational learning. It's how most animals learn. If they're not, unless they're, it's a very specific type of strategy by some usually smaller, short-lived organisms where they leave them, they dump the kids, right? So frogs, things like that. But dinosaurs, I'm fairly certain we think these days, especially based off of things like clutch size, that they invested into their young, so they wouldn't have just left them. So how are these, maybe that's why they went extinct. Maybe they should lean into that Noah took all the eggs because he thought it would work, and then the babies didn't know how to survive and died. Then there's the whole issue of what does everything eat? It gets off the ark, everything has been raised and salted effectively, and there is nothing to eat but each other. So the carnivores, do they just selectively eat the dinosaurs? There's so many alternative explanations here, but I think they realize that most of them sound kind of dumb, so they don't go with them. Okay. Some might argue that there would have been too many dinosaurs to fit on the ark. After all, there are over 600 different names of dinosaurs. Oh, honey, it's gotten worse since then. In Genesis 6:20, the Bible talks about we've got the kinds argument. The cat varieties today have developed by natural and artificial selection, but maybe there were only a few cat kinds on Noah's Ark. I mean, they've really narrowed that down to one. This speciation is not, all caps, evolution, since it is based strictly on created information already present and is thus limited. Not always, right? We do get new genes that constitute new species. The ice fish is a classic example. It's got basically antifreeze in its blood. It's a single de novo gene that allows for this ice fish to exploit a brand new territory. And yet physically it looks very similar to some of its closer relatives. Is that speciation, Ken? Right? Because new information was created, wasn't it? And now these days, actually, they'll be like, yeah, well, some new information can create it, but not enough to get what you want. Okay. But true science has only observed that it takes information to produce information. Information never, all caps, arises by chance. Thus, evolution in the Darwinian sense of dinosaurs is impossible. Again, this is simply not true. We see examples of de novo genes all the time, and there's a very lush literature base to explore there. Number of kinds of dinosaurs. All right, sweet. Okay, after carefully investigating the different dinosaur finds, it seems as though there were probably 50 distinct groups or kinds of dinosaur that needed to be represented on the Ark. In addition, it must be remembered that Noah's Ark was extremely large. In their classic book, The Genesis Flood, Whitcomb and Morris, what? Their calculations suggest fewer than 75,000 individual animals, more than enough for all the kinds could have fit on only one floor of the Ark, since their average size would have been no bigger than a sheep. So then they're kind of going back and forth with like the average size of the dinosaur versus like taking the kids. Maybe they're just showing that they think there's multiple ways this could have been hashed out. The land animals, including dinosaurs that didn't go in the Ark, of course, drowned. Okay, next. Many of their bodies were preserved in the layers formed by the flood, and thus billions of fossils, billions of dead things buried in rock, blah, 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 Ken Ham's classic thing. And then they talk about how there's an ice age after the flood, the twisted, contorted shapes of these animals preserved in the rock, and a massive number of them in fossil graveyards, and the presence of whole skeletons, which show convincing evidence of being buried rapidly, all testified to the massive flooding. Okay, pause. Because not all of them are in death poses. Not all of the fossil graveyards show signs of being buried strictly by water or by water events. Some of them are volcanic in nature, or it's strictly like a mudslide thing. And moreover, the ones that are water events often show signs of scavenging on like the exposed portions of the bone. So for example, if I have our poor sad Homo habilis here, and maybe just, the sort of occipital portion of the skull is exposed, like this, after a mass flood that kills poor Homo habilis and its body is like rotting, but this part is still exposed. There are scavenging marks on the exposed portions of the bone. Okay, how is there scavenging marks on the exposed portion of the bone if it's miles and miles under a global flood? What's scavenging from them? Specifically, we can actually track some of the specific scavenger animals responsible in the cases of these fossil graveyards, like the one at Dinosaur National Monument, which I went to and got to see. It was epic. But of course, we don't touch on any of that. Is there any evidence for dinosaurs living after the flood? Okay, this is my question. Like, what happens right afterwards? The dinosaur kinds began a new life in a new world. 2 by 2, they, along with the other animals, came out to breed and repopulate the Earth. They would have left the landing place on the Ark and moved over the Earth's surface. The descendants of these dinosaurs gave rise to the dragon legend. But the world into which they emerged was different from the one they knew before Noah's flood. It had been ravaged by water, violence. It would have been much more difficult world in which to survive. But why were the mammals better at it then? Why were they better? Again, dinosaurs were living on the earth at the same time as people. Not that long after the flood, a man called Job heard God describe a giant creature that Job was obviously familiar with. God was showing Job how great he was as the creator. He was the Behemoth and Leviathan. We already mentioned them. In the notes of many Bible commentaries, Behemoth is said to be an elephant or a hippopotamus. Besides the fact that those were not the largest land animals God made, the description doesn't make sense since the Behemoth is said to have a tail like a cedar. And then Letha has given us this drawing to illustrate how silly it would be for it to be either of these two creatures. Except most translations, actually, when you're looking at the OG Hebrew, have that as moves the tail like a cedar. And cedar trees get whipped around in the wind a lot, right? So have you ever seen like an elephant perhaps defecate or a hippopotamus defecate? Their tail does this, which is quite interesting. But I actually take the opinion that the Behemoth and the Leviathan are cosmic entities, especially, since they're referenced, at least the Leviathan is referenced as Rahab in other portions of the Bible, even the modern one, and it's very clearly something that is kind of a one-off and unique. There aren't Leviathans, there aren't Behemoths, there is the Behemoth, and there is the Leviathan. Reasons for extinction. Okay, so now we get to blame the extinction on the flood. Genesis states that after the flood, God told Noah that from then on the animals would fear them and man could eat their flesh. There were yet more changes because of sin. Even for man, the world had become a harsher place. In order to survive, the once easily obtained plant protein would now have to be supplemented by animal sources. Man went into competition with animals to survive. Both animals and man would find their survival ability tested to the utmost. Sounds like the calling card for the Jurassic World 4. The Great Dinosaur Mystery. Both animals and man. Okay, in fact, it is a fact of history deducible from the fossil record and the written history of man and from the experience over recent centuries that not all species of life on this planet have survived that competition. While we know that the vast numbers of marine species became extinct at the time of Noah's flood, we need to remember that many plant and air-breathing land-dwelling animals must have become extinct only since the flood, either due to man's action, competition with other species, or because of the harsher post-flood environment. Many groups are still becoming extinct. Dinosaurs are certainly numbered among the creatures that seem to no longer exist. Why then do people get so intrigued about the disappearance of the dinosaurs and have little interest in the extinction of, example, Archaeopteryx, which is a plant, not Archaeopteryx, Archaeopteryx. If it weren't for their size and appeal as monsters, dinosaurs would have excited no more than passing interest. People love the Permian, Ken. I love the Permian. What about our beautiful Carboniferous? What of the Devonian, right? Come on. Evolutionists have capitalized on the dinosaur fascination and have inundated the world with evolutionary propaganda centered around the dinosaurs. He's so paranoid. This has resulted in even Christians being permeated by evolutionary philosophy. As a result, they tend to single out the dinosaurs as something mysterious. However, there is nothing, all caps, mysterious about them if we build our thinking on the Bible. Think about it. If you were to go to the zoo and ask why it has an endangered species program, you would probably get an answer something like this. Good, we're gonna kick Greenpeace and people who care about biodiversity while we're down. Endangered species programs, why, it's obvious. We've lost a lot of animals from this earth. Animals are becoming extinct all the time. We need to act to save the animals. Look at this long list of animals that are gone forever. If you then asked, why are animals becoming extinct? You might get an answer like this. Why, it's obvious. People are killing them. Lack of food, man destroying the environment, diseases, genetic problems, catastrophes like floods. There are lots of reasons. Then if you said, well, can you tell me what happened to the dinosaurs? The answer would probably be, we don't know. Scientists have suggested dozens of possible reasons, but we don't know. Not true. We do know that the Chicxulub impactor was like a massive, if not the only source, the only reason dinosaurs went extinct. Some people propose the Deccan traps didn't help things, and it probably didn't, but there's also the idea that, the Chicxulub impactor caused the Deccan traps to start going nuts, which would mean that in the end, it's the asteroid, right? And the iridium layer, that's a tough one to beat. Haven't heard a creationist tackle that yet. How do you get an iridium layer in a global flood? And one that distinctly separates the dinosaurs from everything else at that. Maybe one of the reasons dinosaurs are extinct is because we didn't start our endangered species programs early enough. The point is, the same reasons that cause extinction today, all as a result of man's sin, the curse, the effects of the flood, etc., are the same reasons that caused the dinosaurs to become extinct, if they really are all extinct. This is the one thing I would really love for the creationists to be right about. Are dinosaurs extinct? It is hard to say categorically that any animal is extinct, since scientists can't possibly go everywhere on this planet and simultaneously declare an animal to have disappeared entirely. That is true, but I really do doubt that there are any brachiosaurs still lumbering around in the Congo. Geologists, the traditional declarers of extinction, oh my god, geology, they're coming for you, have been severely embarrassed by several times when, after having declared animals to be extinct, they have discovered them alive and well in environments scientists merely hadn't searched. At first, when I read this sentence, I thought it was going to be about coelacanths, but instead they say explorers have recently found elephants in Nepal that have the characteristics of mammoths. I really wish I had the optimism of 2004 Ken Ham that these were actually mammoths. Scientists in Australia found living trees they thought to have been extinct at the time of the dinosaurs. One scientist said it was like finding a living dinosaur. It needs to be emphasized that it is neither possible nor feasible to have one person at every point on Earth's surface looking in every direction all at one time just to be 100% sure that there are no dinosaurs, and that, therefore, dinosaurs are truly extinct. That's definitely how I would do it if I had unlimited funds to do a search for dinosaurs. Just everyone look around. There have been present-day reported sightings of dinosaur-type animals. Okay, cool. Okay, so we got the Mokele mbembe. These have usually been confined to out-of-the-way places such as the middle of the Congo jungles. Cave paintings done by Indians in America seem to clearly depict a dinosaur. That's probably the Havatsupai dinosaur. I've covered these both in other videos. However, evolutionary indoctrination that man did not live at the same time as dinosaurs precludes evolutionary scientists from even considering these drawings as dinosaurs that lived at the same time as Indians. You need to know that many of these are very, very hard to see as dinosaurs. So we're just gonna do a quick zoom over here and check it out so I can show you. The Havatsupai dinosaur. This is one of my favorites, mostly because of this comparison. I actually covered this in my very first video on the channel. That's just brilliant right there. Clearly a dinosaur, as you can see if you squint and step back. We've also got this lovely picture right here. That one would be convincing, except they cover this. I've seen this covered in other articles, and secular scientists, I say secular because I'm being indoctrinated by Ken Ham's vocabulary, non-young Earth creationist archaeologists have looked at these petroglyphs, and it turns out that if you don't up the contrast and draw a picture around it, what looks to be this sauropod here is actually several different overlaid petroglyphs. So it's not a dinosaur, but it is when you draw a dinosaur on top of it. That's a nice strat, boys, but it's not going to work on this gentle and, of course, very modern ape. Okay. It could even be that the Loch Ness Monster, if Nessie really exists, is a variety of Plesiosaur that still survives today. I did not read this, by the way, before we went over it. I know it seems like I pre-watched here, but I did not. And it certainly would be no embarrassment to a creationist if someone discovered a living Tyrannosaurus Rex in a jungle. God, if only. It wouldn't even be surprising if it happened to be a plant eater. It would, actually. However, this would be a tremendous embarrassment to an evolutionist. If we found a T-Rex in the Congo tomorrow and it ate only plants, I would be feeling many emotions. When scientists do find animals or plants they thought were extinct millions of years ago, they call them living fossils. There are now hundreds of documented living fossils that have become an embarrassment for evolutionists. And then we have a citation 69, nice. I'm just kind of curious as to which ones we're listing here, if it's not like coelacanth and maybe some like smaller organisms. Okay, it is not listed. It's just a reference to a book called Living Fossils, Confirmation of Creation. Stasis is a thing, you guys. Like, Darwin talked about a lot of this, but people like to pretend like he didn't, I guess. And no, we couldn't clone a dinosaur, even if we had dinosaur DNA as in the fictional movie Jurassic Park. Not unless there was already a living female dinosaur. Okay, because they want us to implant it. What about an artificial womb or egg, Ken? Scientists have found that to clone an animal, they must have an egg of a living female, as there's machinery in the cytoplasm of the cell that is necessary for the creature to develop. Actually, evolutionists don't really think dinosaurs are extinct anyways. At the entrance to the bird exhibit at the Cincinnati Zoo, one reads the following sign: "Dinosaurs went extinct millions of years ago." Or did they? No, birds are essentially modern short-tailed feathered dinosaurs. That's very cool. I love it. In the mid-1960s, Dr. John Ostrom, from Yale University began to popularize the idea that dinosaurs evolved into birds. No, birds are just still dinosaurs. They are archosaurs, my friend. Not all evolutionists agree. Oh, drink Alan Fiducia. Oh, I love Alan Fiducia. This guy is white-knuckling the idea that the modern birds are dinosaurs. He's just being dragged into the 20th century on this one. Okay, there have been recent attempts to indoctrinate the public into believing modern birds are dinosaurs. Okay, they're just mad. They're just still mad. In 1996, newspapers reported on a find in China of a reptile fossil that supposedly had feathers. Yeah, we have so many feathered dinosaurs. I already showed you a nice little slideshow, but, maybe we watch it one more time. Sadly, the secular media has become so blatant in its anti-Christian stand and evolutionary propaganda that they are bold enough to make such incredible statements as parrots and hummingbirds are also dinosaurs. They are. If you want to hold to any kind of phylogenetic truth, they are. Several news reports have fueled the bird-dinosaur debate among evolutionists. One report concerns the research on the embryonic origin of the fingers of birds and dinosaurs show they could not have evolved from dinosaurs. I remember this one. It actually mixed up which digit was which, and that's why they found it to be impossible. Okay, more dinosaur feathers that they don't like. Okay, there is no evidence dinosaurs evolved into birds. Dinosaurs have always been dinosaurs. Ken Ham strikes me as the type, I mean, I know for a fact he's this type, who would see, like, feathered dinosaurs in Jurassic World, and then he would be like, it's not even scary anymore. Where are the quips? Why does it matter? Okay. Although the subject of dinosaurs is fascinating, some who read this book might say, why are you making this topic such a big deal? Surely there are more important things to deal with in today's world. Oh my god, such as abortion, homosexual behavior, euthanasia, suicide, lawlessness, pornography, and so on. These are all on the same level if you're Ken Ham. Good lord. Shouldn't dealing with these social issues that plague our culture be the priority? In fact, we should be telling people about the gospel of Jesus Christ rather than worrying about side issues like dinosaurs. You can tell that Ken has been told this many times before, but let us for a moment recall the homophobic arcade game that you can find in the Ark Encounter and Creation Museum.
There's a war on. There's a war in society. It's Christianity versus humanism. But you know, at a foundational level, it really is creation versus evolution. You know, the whole creation-evolution issue is not just a side issue. It's one of the most fundamental, important issues of today.
We get this lovely graphic that compares opposite things. So, for example, the meaning of life is the opposite to abortion, standards are the opposite to pornography, marriage to homosexual behavior, laws to lawlessness, God's word to man's opinion, and creation to evolution. Oh boy, there's a lot to unpack there psychologically. The implications. Because of the implications. If one accepts the atheistic evolutionary teachings on dinosaurs, then God's word is not authoritative and all things can be explained by natural processes. There is no God. I don't know about that. Like, if you really want to take this up with, 2004 Ken Ham would be so sad to see the statistics today. It's like less than 20, I think it's like 18% of people are young earth creationists in the USA. It's lower than it's ever been. The biggest chunk is theistic evolutionists, which is why these days Ken spends quite a bit of time dogging on biologos. Okay, so now we're talking about, is there a right or wrong? Like, where do we get right and wrong from? This is a classic move from these guys. What is marriage all about? Good lord. When Jesus was asked concerning marriage and divorce, he answered and said unto them, have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this shall cause man to leave his father and mother, he shall cleave to his wife, and they in twain shall be one flesh. This is the homophobia section. Thus, if a person is not a Christian yet believes in the marriage doctrine of one man and one woman, then they're inconsistent in their thinking, as the only basis for marriage is in Genesis. Now one could say that marriage was convenient to you, but how could you tell your son, for instance, that he couldn't marry Bill? There is no justification in this outside of accepting a literal Genesis. So Ken Ham here, just in case you didn't catch that, is trying to corner the homophobia market to say that you can't hate the gays and not be a creationist. So if any of you guys want to come back over to my side. Also, the married couple, oh god, I just can't do this. This is too much for me in this day and age. Why we know homosexual behavior is evil, perverse, and an unnatural deviancy. I really hate when they call it unnatural, because that's just demonstrably false. Like, there are so many gay animals, it's insane, especially in primates. Okay, but also, like, weirdly, bison and lions, very masculine animals. However, the more people reject the book of Genesis and the rest of the Bible as God's authoritative word, the more we should expect to see people rejecting God's foundation for marriage. There is no doubt the acceptance of homosexual behavior is on the rise in Western culture. This goes hand in hand with the increasing acceptance of evolutionary teaching and its consequence of undermining the authority of the Bible. Technically that is right. Both of those things have gone up here in the West. But I don't know that they're necessarily correlated. Maybe they are. Foundations under attack. This is the classic. This is the arcade game that you guys saw a bit ago. Okay, the biblical doctrine of origins as contained in the book of Genesis is foundational. This is the you can't be a real Christian and accept evolution that Ken Ham does a lot. Okay, so the problem and then the solution, which is here. Okay, millions of years in the gospel. The teaching that dinosaurs lived and died millions of years ago is actually a direct attack on the foundation of the gospel. The fossil record which we find dinosaurs in, consists of billions of dead creatures. In fact, it is a record of death, disease, suffering, cruelty, and brutality. It is a very ugly record. Evolutionary scientists claim the fossil layers over the Earth's surface date back hundreds of millions of years, and it just goes on and on and on, talking about how accepting evolution will just bring about the apocalypse. Not literally, but it's close. Thus, teaching millions of years, disease, and suffering before Adam sinned is a direct attack on the foundation of the message of the cross. Okay, missionary lizards. Sweet. Dinosaurs are probably used more than anything to brainwash people, including young children, in evolutionary ideas of random processes producing life. Sadly, I have found that over and over, people, particularly students at colleges and universities, say that because of evolution, the Bible must be wrong. That's silly. I say this as someone who is an eternal fence setter, but that's super silly. Obviously, those two things can live in tandem for many people, and just do. There are so many, science-affirming Christians out there, and evolution, age of the earth accepting Christians out there. I find this very condescending to them, and when I was a theistic evolutionist, I was very, very miffed by the whole idea. It's just like, it's kind of dumb. Because a huge number of evolutionary books on dinosaurs and movies, like Jurassic Park and The Lost World, he's just going on being mad about dinosaur media. There are plenty of people to be mad about dinosaur media that don't include you, Ken. But then we get, and I already showed you guys this, Dan Leith, this missionary lizards. Christians are often confused and don't know what to say to their children, so sadly, the next generation grows up accepting evolution and oftentimes rejecting the claims of the Bible and thus Christianity. The truth is that dinosaurs are easily explained and understood when the Bible is used as a foundation for thinking. Not only can answers be given about when they lived, how they died, etc., they can be used as all caps missionary lizards. Absolutely incredible. Telling people the true history of the world from the Bible and presenting a solution to the world's problems is a wonderful message, and that's what this book is truly about. And then I think this next section was written by his brother. So I'm going to skim it and see if it's worth reading. It really wasn't, but there is this one part where he illustrates a conversation between a father and a son. I guess it's supposed to be about the dangers of dinosaurs, like non-YEC dinosaurs. So I'm going to do that for you now. Read it to you. Hey, Dad, I had a lesson on dinosaurs at school today. How should I, as a Christian, understand these creatures? Well, son, I don't really know. Didn't they live millions of years ago? That's what they say, Dad, but how does all that fit with the Bible? Well, son, I'm sure we can accept the scientist's view and not affect our belief in the Bible, can't we? I don't know, Dad. I mean, if what the scientists say is true, then doesn't that mean the Bible is not accurate in Genesis when it talks about creation, the flood, and the ark? Son, look, the Bible tells us why God created, not how. We have to leave that up to the scientists. Okay, Dad, but what about the parts of the Bible? What parts can I trust? Did we all really come from Adam? How can there be a God of love as I learned at the church? I know you're hanging on the edge of your seat. When we see all this suffering in the world, how do I explain all the races of people on the earth? How should I understand the Grand Canyon? These are things little boys ask. Did coal really form over millions of years? There seem to be too many animals to fit on Noah's Ark. Isn't this story just a fairy tale? Why is marriage only supposed to be between a man and a woman? Why, Dad, if I'm a sinner as the Bible says, what does it mean? Where did sin come from? If the Bible is just a book about salvation, how do I even know it's true? I'm confused, Dad. And then Ken Ham's brother says, but the Christian dad who believes God's word and understands that all his thinking is built on the Bible, starting with Genesis, does have answers, lots of answers, and not just answers about dinosaurs, but answers to the basic questions about life and the universe. And that's the end of really what we're going to look at. You can see that there's quite a hefty appendix here. Again, can't stand this kind of thing, right? Like, Ken Ham thinks that he can just no true Scotsman everybody who disagrees with his interpretation of the Bible. And like, I know some really respectable young earth creationists out there who don't behave like this and just say, sorry, you know, tough, if you're not YEC, then you're not for me and you're not for Jesus. He doesn't actually consider you saved, which is really kind of implied pretty heavily in this text. I don't like it. Again, I was offended when I was a theistic evolutionist by this kind of thing. Imagine being so arrogant as to think that you can be the litmus test for who is a true Christian. That's really gross, quite frankly. And of course, the science in this text is abysmal. Science in quotations. But, you know, I do cut this thing a bit of slack because it's not really meant to be for non-kids, I don't think. But there are some winning, funny Dan Letha things in here. For example, in this Creation-Wise comic, when the kid goes to college, his t-shirt says liberal you, which is kind of funny. And he also gets old and becomes a theistic evolutionist and then like becomes an atheist or something. I'm sure all of the theistic evolutionist scientists think that is definitely in good faith. There's this little comic, which is just kind of a rehash of that thing we covered earlier about the tale of the behemoth. And then there's this rather mean trick question called Creation Quiz. Which of the following creatures has been on the Earth the longest? And then the answer is they've all been on the Earth for the same amount of time. And then we get, you know, some more kind of insulting jabs at the theistic evolution and the older creationists here. It's just kind of like, you know, you see where some of the YouTube YECs get their team sports attitude from. And some of these sources in the appendix do make claims, like they have things that we could investigate. And maybe we will at some point, but it's not going to be here because I'm tired and I want to go to bed. And so, my gentle and, of course, very modern apes, I hope you had fun. I hope you had a good time, had a few laughs. I'll be here next time with another filler content / academic deep dive into something cool and awesome. In the meantime, take care of yourselves.